The autumn rain fell in sheets against the storefront windows of Reed and Daughter Books, turning the Brooklyn street into a blur of gray and amber light. Isabella Reed stood behind the old mahogany counter, staring at the stack of envelopes she couldn't bring herself to open. Red ink. Final notice. Overdue. The words blurred together like the rain outside. 24 years old, and she was drowning. Her father had been dead for 8 months. Cancer, the kind that ate through savings accounts faster than it ate through a body. Gregory Reed had fought for 2 years, and Isabella had fought alongside him, watching the medical bills pile up like snow in a storm that never ended. The bookstore, their family's legacy for 3 generations, had been mortgaged twice. Then came the experimental treatments not covered by insurance, the specialists, the hope that cost everything, and then he died anyway. Isabella pressed her palms against the cool wood of the counter, feeling the grain beneath her fingers. The same counter where her father had taught her to make change when she was 7, where she'd done her homework while he helped customers find the perfect book. The smell of old paper and leather bindings had been her childhood, her comfort. Now it smelled like failure. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. A man stepped inside, water dripping from his expensive wool coat. He was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and eyes that assessed everything in one sweep. His suit probably cost more than her rent. He didn't belong in this neighborhood, and he certainly didn't belong in her struggling bookstore. Miss Isabella Reed. His voice was smooth, professional, completely out of place among the dusty shelves. "We're actually closed," Isabella said, though she hadn't bothered to flip the sign. There hadn't been a customer in days. "I'm not here for books." He reached into his coat pocket, producing a business card and a cream-colored envelope. "My name is Richard Morrison. I'm an attorney representing a client who wishes to discuss a business proposition with you." Isabella took the card with trembling fingers. Morrison and Associates, a Manhattan address that probably came with a view of Central Park. "I don't understand. What kind of business proposition? The kind that could resolve your current financial difficulties." His eyes flickered to the pile of bills on the counter. All of them. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know what you're talking about. Miss Reed, my client is aware of your situation. Your father's medical debts, the mortgage on this property, the personal loans from various creditors. The total amounts to approximately $375,000. He paused, letting the number hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "My client is prepared to clear those debts entirely, plus provide additional compensation in exchange for a service only you can provide." Isabella's mouth went dry. She'd heard stories, girls disappearing into trafficking rings, debt slavery operations disguised as legitimate business. Her hand moved instinctively toward her phone. "I think you should leave. It's a marriage contract, Miss Reed. Nothing more, nothing less." The words stopped her cold. "What? 1 year of your time. You would live as my client's wife, attend certain social functions, maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage. At the end of the contracted term, you would receive a divorce, $500,000, and all your debts cleared. You would never hear from my client again." Isabella laughed, but it came out wrong, shrill and desperate. "This is insane. Who does this? Who are you people?" Morrison's expression didn't change. "People with resources and problems that require unconventional solutions. My client needs a wife for business purposes. You need financial stability. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." I don't." Isabella shook her head, trying to clear it. "Why me? I'm nobody. My client has his reasons." Morrison placed the envelope on the counter. "The details are inside, including the contract terms and the name of my client. You have 48 hours to consider the offer. If you're interested, there's a phone number. If not, you'll never hear from us again." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Miss Reed, I've been practicing law for 27 years. I've never seen my client make an offer like this. Whatever you decide, understand that this opportunity won't come again." Then he was gone, leaving only wet footprints on the hardwood floor and the envelope on her counter. Isabella stared at it for a full minute before her hands moved of their own accord, tearing it open. Inside was a contract, dense with legal language, and a single sheet of letterhead. Her eyes went straight to the name at the top, Alexander Hayes. The blood drained from her face. Everyone in New York knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Alexander Hayes, businessman, philanthropist, and according to every whispered rumor in the city, one of the most powerful figures in organized crime on the East Coast. The man who controlled half the ports, who had judges and politicians in his pocket, who made people disappear when they became problems. And he wanted to marry her. Isabella spent that night reading the contract by lamplight, her best friend Sophia sitting across from her at the small kitchen table in her apartment above the bookstore. "This is completely insane," Sophia said for the 15th time, her dark eyes wide with disbelief. "Isabella, this is a mafia boss, an actual real-life criminal. He's never been convicted of anything," Isabella murmured, scanning another clause. "Technically, he's just a businessman." "Oh, sure, and I'm technically the Queen of England." Sophia grabbed the contract. "Listen to yourself, you're actually considering this?" Isabella leaned back in her chair, exhaustion making her bones ache. "Soph, they're going to take the bookstore. Next month, maybe sooner. I've got collection agencies calling me 10 times a day. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I'm 24 years old and my life is already over. So your solution is to marry a monster? My solution is to survive." Isabella took the contract back, her voice dropping. "It's 1 year, 12 months. I've already lost Dad. I can't lose the bookstore too. It's all I have left of him." Sophia's expression softened. She reached across the table, gripping Isabella's hand. "What if he hurts you? What if you can't leave after the year is up? The contract is explicit. 1 year, then divorce. It's legally binding. Bella, men like Alexander Hayes don't follow rules. They make them." Isabella knew Sophia was right. But she also knew what would happen if she didn't take this deal. She'd lose everything, end up working 3 jobs just to stay in a studio apartment somewhere, watching from a distance as someone else bought her family's bookstore and turned it into a coffee shop or a yoga studio. Her father's legacy would disappear like he'd never existed at all. "I'm calling the number," Isabella said quietly. "Bella, I've already decided." The meeting was arranged for the following evening. A car would pick her up at 7. A black SUV with tinted windows and a driver who didn't speak. Isabella spent the day in a daze, helping the few customers who wandered in, organizing shelves that didn't need organizing. She told herself she was just going to hear him out. She could still say no, but she knew she wouldn't. At 7 o'clock exactly, the SUV pulled up outside. The driver opened the door without a word, and Isabella climbed inside, her heart hammering so hard she thought she might be sick. The vehicle smelled like leather and expensive cologne. As they pulled into Manhattan traffic, Isabella watched Brooklyn disappear behind her, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. They drove north, crossing into the Upper East Side, where buildings reached toward the sky like glass and steel monuments to wealth. The SUV turned into an underground parking garage beneath a sleek residential tower, and the driver finally spoke. "Penthouse level. He's expecting you." The elevator ride felt eternal. Isabella caught her reflection in the polished doors. Pale skin, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing the only professional dress she owned. She looked exactly like what she was, a girl from Brooklyn who didn't belong in this world. The doors opened directly into the penthouse apartment. Isabella stepped out onto marble floors that probably cost more than her entire building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The park spread out like a dark jewel, the city lights beginning to glow as dusk settled. The space was modern, minimalist, decorated in shades of gray and black with occasional touches of deep blue. Everything looked expensive and untouched, like a showroom rather than a home. "Miss Reed." She turned toward the voice and saw him for the first time. Alexander Hayes stood near the windows, silhouetted against the city lights. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dark suit perfectly. As he moved closer, Isabella could make out his features. Sharp jawline, dark hair with touches of silver at the temples despite only being 34, and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-blue. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous, like a blade hidden in expensive wrapping. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Please, sit." He gestured toward a seating area, a charcoal sofa and chairs arranged around a glass coffee table. Isabella sat stiffly on the edge of a chair, her hands clasped in her lap. Alexander took the chair across from her, maintaining a calculated distance. Everything about him radiated control and power. "I assume you've read the contract?" he began. "Yes. And you have questions?" "About 1,000 of them." Isabella forced herself to meet his eyes. If she was going to do this, she wouldn't cower. "Why me? You could marry anyone. Why track down some random bookstore owner in Brooklyn?" Something flickered across Alexander's face. Amusement, maybe, or respect. "You're not random. I've had you vetted thoroughly. You're intelligent, educated, loyal to your family. You have no criminal record, no drug problems, no scandals. You're exactly what I need. Which is what exactly? A prop? A wife? A legitimate one, in the eyes of the law and society. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. I have business interests that require a certain respectability. A stable marriage helps create that image. So, this is about appearances. Everything is about appearances, Miss Reed. Surely you understand that. Isabella swallowed hard. The contract says I have to live here. With you. Yes, we must appear to be a genuine couple. That means cohabitation, public appearances together, maintaining the illusion of a relationship. He paused. But I want to be clear. This is strictly a business arrangement. You will have your own bedroom, your own space. I won't touch you unless absolutely necessary for appearances, such as holding hands at events or a kiss for photographs. Your physical autonomy will be respected at all times. The clinical way he said it should have been reassuring, but instead it made Isabella feel hollow. This was a transaction. She was selling a year of her life to a stranger. What about my bookstore? It will remain open if you wish, managed by someone you trust. Or it can be closed temporarily during the contract term. That's your choice. And after the year, you receive $500,000, all debts cleared, a clean divorce, and you never see me again. You'll sign a non-disclosure agreement, of course. What happens in this marriage stays confidential. Isabella looked around the penthouse, the wealth, the view, the cold perfection of it all. What if I say no? Alexander's expression didn't change. Then you say no. The offer is withdrawn and you handle your debts however you see fit. I won't interfere with your life. But you'll find someone else. Eventually. She believed him. Men like Alexander Hayes always got what they wanted one way or another. Isabella thought of her father, of the bookstore, of the life she'd already lost, and the small piece she might be able to save. 1 year, 12 months of pretending, and then freedom. Freedom and enough money to rebuild. If I agree, she said slowly, I want it in writing that the bookstore remains mine. No matter what. You can't take it, use it as leverage, or claim any ownership. Done. And I want to be able to see my friends. I'm not going to be a prisoner. Within reason and with security. My world has enemies, Miss Reed. If you become my wife, even temporarily, you become a potential target. You'll need protection. The weight of that settled over her. She hadn't thought about the danger, not really. She'd been too focused on the money, the solution to her problems. But Alexander was right. His world was violent. She'd be stepping into something dark and complicated. I need time to think, she whispered. You have until tomorrow night, same time. Alexander stood and Isabella rose with him. I'll have my driver take you home. She turned toward the elevator, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you love anyone? Is there someone else? Alexander's expression hardened, a flash of something painful crossing his features before disappearing behind his controlled mask. No, Miss Reed, there's no one. That's precisely why this arrangement works. Isabella nodded and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Alexander Hayes standing alone in his perfect penthouse, looking out at the city he controlled. He looked powerful, untouchable. He looked lonely. The next evening, Isabella called the number. Her hands shook as she held the phone, Sophia sitting beside her with tears streaming down her face. I'll do it, Isabella said when Morrison answered. I'll sign the contract. Excellent. I'll have the final paperwork prepared. The wedding will be in 3 days. 3 days? Mr. Hayes prefers to move quickly once a decision is made. A car will collect you tomorrow at 9 a.m. for medical examinations and legal documentation. Welcome to the arrangement, Miss Reed. The line went dead. Isabella sat in silence, staring at her phone. Sophia wrapped her arms around her, and they stayed like that for a long time, two best friends holding on to each other while the world shifted beneath them. The wedding was exactly as cold and clinical as Isabella expected. It took place in a Manhattan courthouse with only Morrison and a man Alexander introduced as Marcus, his head of security, as witnesses. Isabella wore a simple white dress she'd bought the day before, nothing special. Alexander wore one of his perfect suits. The judge, who seemed to know Alexander personally, rushed through the ceremony. When it came time to kiss, Alexander merely pressed his lips to her forehead, brief and impersonal. You may now sign the documents, the judge said, not bothering with the traditional pronouncement. Isabella signed her name next to Alexander's, making it legal, making it real. Mrs. Isabella Hayes. She felt nothing. Numbness had set in somewhere between the medical exams. checking for STDs and pregnancy, humiliating and thorough, and the legal documentation, signing away a year of her life in triplicate. This wasn't a wedding. It was a business merger. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd of photographers waited. Someone had tipped them off. "Smile," Alexander murmured, his hand firm on the small of her back. "We're in love, remember?" Isabella smiled as cameras flashed, feeling Alexander's lips brush her temple in a gesture that would look affectionate in photos. Up close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark. His body was warm against hers, solid and real in a way that made her dizzy. "Beautiful," he whispered, but he was looking at the cameras, not at her. That night, Isabella moved into the penthouse. Her entire life fit into 4 suitcases and 3 boxes of books. Alexander showed her to her room, a massive bedroom suite with its own bathroom and a view of the park. Everything was already prepared, fresh linens, toiletries, even a closet full of new clothes in her exact size. "If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, let Marcus know. He'll arrange replacements." Alexander stood in the doorway, maintaining distance. "I'm usually gone by 7 a.m. My schedule is unpredictable. Staff will prepare meals, but you're free to use the kitchen if you prefer. The gym is on the lower level. The library is down the hall. Treat this as your home." "For the next year," Isabella added. "For the next year," he agreed. They stood there in awkward silence, strangers bound by a contract and a marriage license. "Good night, Mrs. Hayes," Alexander finally said. "Good night." He closed the door, and Isabella was alone in her gilded cage. She walked to the window, looking out at the city that had swallowed her whole. Somewhere out there was Brooklyn, her bookstore, her real life, but that felt like it belonged to someone else now. Isabella Hayes, the Mafia boss's wife. She pressed her hand against the glass, feeling its cool surface, and wondered if she'd just saved herself or sold her soul. Isabella woke to unfamiliar silence, not the comfortable quiet of her Brooklyn apartment where she could hear Mrs. Chen's television through the walls or the morning traffic on the street below. This was the silence of wealth, thick, insulated, suffocating. She opened her eyes to high ceilings and morning light filtering through automated blinds that had opened precisely at 7 a.m. She'd been Mrs. Alexander Hayes for 2 weeks, and she still felt like an imposter. The penthouse had lasted only 3 days before Alexander announced they were moving to his primary residence in the Hamptons. "More privacy," he'd said, as if that explained uprooting her to a massive estate an hour and a half from the city. The house was actually a compound, 12,000 square feet of modern architecture perched on 3 acres of oceanfront property, surrounded by security gates, cameras, and guards who nodded respectfully but never quite met her eyes. Isabella pulled on a robe, silk, expensive, nothing she would have chosen for herself, and padded downstairs. The kitchen was enormous, all white marble and stainless steel, and already occupied by Elena, the housekeeper, a stern woman in her 50s, who ran the household with military precision. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," Elena said without looking up from the espresso machine. "Your breakfast is ready on the terrace. Mr. Hayes left instructions about your schedule today." "My schedule?" Isabella accepted the coffee cup, wrapping her hands around its warmth. "You have a fitting at 11 with the stylist Mr. Hayes hired. Tonight there's a charity gala in Manhattan. Your first public appearance as a couple since the wedding. The car will leave at 6. Isabella's stomach tightened. She'd known this was coming. Alexander had been clear. Being his wife meant playing a role, and that role included standing beside him at events where New York's elite gathered to see and be seen. She'd been dreading it. "What kind of charity?" she asked, stalling. "Children's hospital fundraiser, very high profile." Elena finally looked at her, and her expression softened slightly. "Don't worry. Mr. Hayes knows what he's doing. Just smile and let him lead." Easy for her to say. Elena wasn't the one who'd be paraded around like a prize while everyone whispered about how Alexander Hayes had suddenly acquired a wife no one had ever heard of. Isabella took her coffee to the terrace where a breakfast spread waited. Fresh fruit, yogurt, pastries, eggs prepared 3 different ways. Enough food for 5 people. She picked at a croissant and stared out at the Atlantic Ocean, gray and churning under an overcast sky. October on the coast was beautiful but melancholy, all muted colors and the constant sound of waves. She'd barely seen Alexander since they'd moved here. He left before dawn most mornings, returning late if at all. Some nights she heard him come in around 2 or 3 a.m., his footsteps quiet in the hallway outside her bedroom. They were married, living in the same house, and they were complete strangers. The stylist arrived exactly at 11, a whirlwind named Dominique who swept through the house with 2 assistants and enough garment bags to outfit a small army. Isabella stood in her bedroom while Dominique circled her like a predator, assessing. Good bone structure, excellent skin, hair needs professional treatment, but the color is natural. That's good, very good. Mr. Hayes said you needed a complete wardrobe and a look for tonight. Dominique snapped her fingers, and the assistants began unpacking dresses. For the gala, we want sophisticated, elegant, but not trying too hard. You're his wife, not his accessory. There's a difference. Is there? Isabella muttered. Dominique's sharp eyes caught hers. Yes, darling, there is. An accessory can be replaced. A wife has permanence, power. Even if, she trailed off, clearly aware of rumors. Everyone in certain circles seemed to know this marriage wasn't a love match, even if they didn't know the specific details. They settled on a midnight blue gown, sleeveless, floor length, with a neckline that was elegant without being provocative. The fabric moved like water, clinging in all the right places. When Isabella looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Perfect, Dominique declared. You look like you belong at his side. That was exactly what Isabella was afraid of. Alexander returned at 5:30, which Elena indicated was unusually early. Isabella was in her room having her hair and makeup done by professionals Dominique had sent over, when she heard his voice in the hallway, deep, commanding, discussing something with Marcus. Then silence. At 6 o'clock exactly, Isabella descended the main staircase in her gown and heels that made her 3 inches taller but still left her shorter than Alexander. He was waiting in the foyer, devastating in a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been designed specifically for his body. Probably had been. Alexander looked up as she came down the stairs, and for just a moment, something flickered in those gray-blue eyes. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. Then the mask was back in place. You look beautiful, he said, offering his arm. Thank you. Isabella took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. You look appropriate. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. High praise. The drive to Manhattan was quiet, both of them sitting in the back of the SUV while Marcus drove and another security vehicle followed. Isabella watched the landscape change from coastal estates to suburbs to the glittering sprawl of the city. Her city, though it felt foreign now, like somewhere she'd visited in a dream. Are you nervous? Alexander asked suddenly. Isabella glanced at him. He was looking at his phone, seemingly casual, but she sensed the question was deliberate. Should I be? These events can be predatory. People will ask questions. They'll try to determine if our marriage is real or strategic. What should I tell them? The truth. He looked at her then, his eyes intense. That we met, we connected, and we married quickly because when you know, you know. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. People love a romance. Give them one. You want me to lie. I want you to act. There's a difference. He pocketed his phone. Isabella, I need you to understand something. Tonight there will be people who want to see me fail. Rivals, enemies, ambitious prosecutors looking for any weakness. You are, temporarily, my wife. That makes you both my greatest vulnerability and my strongest armor. The weight of his words settled over her. What do you need me to do? Be yourself. Be intelligent and charming, which you are. And when anyone asks, he reached over, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, his grip firm but not controlling. Make them believe we're real. The gala was held at the Plaza Hotel, that iconic landmark Isabella had always associated with movies and fairy tales. Now she was walking through its doors on Alexander Hayes's arm, flash photography exploding around them like artillery fire. Alexander's hand never left the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd with practiced ease. Alexander, congratulations on the marriage. A woman in her 60s materialized, dripping in diamonds. We were all so surprised. You kept this one secret. When something is precious, you protect it, Alexander said smoothly, pulling Isabella closer. Mrs. Vanderholt, may I introduce my wife, Isabella? Charming. Mrs. Vanderholt purred, but her eyes were calculating, measuring. And what do you do, my dear? I own a bookstore in Brooklyn, Isabella said, lifting her chin. Reed and daughter books. 3 generations in my family. How quaint. The word dripped with condescension. I find it's more genuine than collecting art you don't understand or chairing charities you never actually work for, Isabella replied sweetly. Beside her, she felt Alexander's body shake with silent laughter. Mrs. Vanderholt's expression froze. Well, how refreshingly honest. If you'll excuse me. As she swept away, Alexander leaned down, his breath warm against Isabella's ear. That was perfect. She'll tell everyone you're not a pushover. Good. The evening became a blur of introductions, champagne, and careful conversations where every word felt like a chess move. Isabella met businessmen, politicians, society wives who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Through it all, Alexander was a constant presence, his hand on her waist, his body angled protectively, playing the role of devoted husband with an ease that was almost unsettling. During dinner, seated at a table with 2 city council members and a federal judge, Isabella felt Alexander's hand slide over hers under the table. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture that looked intimate but she recognized as a warning. She glanced up and saw a man approaching their table, tall, silver-haired, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hayes," the man said. "I heard rumors you'd gone domestic. Had to see it to believe it." "Victor." Alexander's voice was pleasant, but Isabella felt his body tense. "I'd introduce you to my wife, but I prefer to keep her away from parasites." Victor Santoro. Isabella recognized the name from news articles. Another businessman with rumored organized crime connections, and according to everything she'd overheard, Alexander's primary rival. "Charming as ever," Victor said, his eyes sliding to Isabella with an assessment that made her skin crawl. "Mrs. Hayes, you're more beautiful than the photos suggest. Tell me, how does a bookstore owner from Brooklyn end up married to the most dangerous man in New York?" "I married a businessman," Isabella said firmly, meeting his gaze. "And if you'll excuse us, we were enjoying our dinner before you arrived." Victor laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "She's got fire. Careful, Hayes. Fire burns." He walked away, leaving a tension in his wake. Alexander's hand tightened on hers. "We're leaving," he said quietly to Marcus, who'd materialized nearby. Now. Within minutes they were in the SUV pulling away from the plaza. Isabella's heart was racing, adrenaline flooding her system. Who was that? Someone you should avoid at all costs. Alexander's jaw was tight, his eyes dark with something Isabella couldn't identify. Anger, or maybe fear. "Alexander, Victor Santoro is everything you've probably heard whispered about me, except he's actually guilty of it all and more. He's violent, unstable, and he just saw you, which means you're now on his radar." The implications crashed over her. "You said I'd be safe, that this was just appearances. You are safe. I have more security than the president, but I need you to understand. My world has consequences. Real ones." He turned to her, and in the dim light of the car he looked older, worn. "I won't let him touch you. I promise you that." Isabella wanted to be angry, to rage at him for putting her in danger, but looking at Alexander's face she saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine concern. Not for his business arrangement, but for her. "Why did you really marry me?" she asked quietly. "The truth, not the business reasons." Alexander was silent for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. "Because I needed someone who wouldn't be corrupted by this life. Someone real." He looked at her. "And because I'm tired of being alone." The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Isabella didn't know what to say. This glimpse of vulnerability from a man who seemed carved from stone left her off balance. They arrived back at the Hamptons estate near midnight. Alexander walked her to her bedroom door, a gesture that felt oddly formal after the intimacy of his confession. "Thank you," he said, "for tonight. You were perfect." "I was myself," Isabella corrected. "Isn't that what you asked for?" "Yes." Something in his expression shifted, softened. "Yes, it was." He lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he stepped back. "Good night, Isabella. Good night." She closed her door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. Whatever she'd expected from this arrangement, it wasn't this. These moments of connection, the way her body responded to his proximity, the way his rare smiles made something flutter in her chest. This was supposed to be business. Clinical. Temporary. So why did it feel like something was beginning? The next morning, Isabella woke to find a note slipped under her door. Alexander's handwriting, strong and precise. "I had to handle business in the city. Will be gone several days. Marcus will be nearby if you need anything. Make yourself at home. The library is well stocked. Several days." Isabella told herself she wasn't disappointed. This was the arrangement. Separate lives under the same roof. She spent the day exploring the parts of the house she hadn't seen yet. The library was her favorite discovery. 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather chairs, a fireplace, and a collection that would make any book lover weep. First editions, rare volumes, everything from classic literature to modern fiction to extensive sections on history, philosophy, and art. She pulled down a worn copy of Jane Eyre and settled into a chair by the window. The ocean was visible through the glass, waves crashing against the rocks below. She was lost in the story when her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Saw photos from the gala. You looked amazing but also terrified. Call me. Isabella smiled and dialed. Sophia picked up immediately. Are you okay? You looked like you were at a funeral, not a party. I'm fine. It was just intense. Isabella closed the book. Soph, I met his rival last night. This guy Victor. He looked at me like I was a target. Oh God, Bella. Maybe you should come home for a few days. Stay with me. I can't. There are rules. Screw the rules. This is your life we're talking about. I know. Isabella sighed. But I signed a contract. And honestly, Alexander seemed genuinely concerned about my safety. He's not what I expected. There was a pause. Please tell me you're not falling for him. What? No, of course not. I just mean, he's more complicated than I thought. He's a criminal, Bella. Allegedly. Even as she said it, Isabella knew how ridiculous it sounded. But the man who'd held her hand last night, who'd confessed to being lonely, didn't feel like a monster. He felt human. They talked for another hour, Sophia filling her in on bookstore news. Mrs. Chen was managing it beautifully, and neighborhood gossip. When they hung up, Isabella felt more grounded, more connected to her real life. But that night, alone in the vast house with only security guards and staff for company, she found herself wondering where Alexander was. What business kept him away? If he was safe, she told herself it didn't matter, that it was just concern for her own situation, not for him personally. She almost believed it. 3 days later, Alexander returned. Isabella was in the library, curled up with a book, when she heard the front door. Voices, Alexander's deep tone, and Marcus's responses. Then footsteps approaching. Alexander appeared in the doorway and Isabella's breath caught. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled, a cut on his jaw that hadn't been there before. He'd been in a fight. You're hurt, she said, setting down her book. It's nothing. But he swayed slightly, catching himself on the doorframe. Isabella was across the room before she could think about it, her hand on his arm. You need to sit down. I need a shower and about 12 hours of sleep. But he let her guide him to a chair. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into his features, smell the cigarette smoke clinging to his clothes. Not his own. She knew he didn't smoke. What happened? Business. Negotiations that got complicated. His eyes met hers, and there was something in them. A darkness. A weight. I'm sorry I was gone so long. You don't owe me an apology. This is your house. It's your house, too. For the next, he trailed off, seeming to lose his train of thought. 11.5 months. Isabella finished. The number felt smaller than it should, less like a prison sentence, and more like a countdown to something she wasn't ready to name. Alexander reached up, his hand covering hers where it rested on his arm. His touch was warm, gentle. Thank you. For what? For being here. It was such a simple statement, but the vulnerability in it made Isabella's chest tighten. This powerful, dangerous man looked at her like she was something precious, something that mattered. I should let you rest, she said. But she didn't move. Neither did he. They stayed like that for a moment that stretched too long, his hand over hers, the air between them charged with something neither seemed ready to acknowledge. Then Alexander pulled away, the walls coming back up. Good night, Isabella. Good night. She left him in the library and returned to her room, but sleep was impossible. She kept seeing the look in his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand. This was dangerous. This feeling building between them, whatever it was. It violated every term of their arrangement. Isabella stared at the ceiling, listening to the ocean, and wondered how you were supposed to guard your heart when you'd already signed it away. The Hamptons estate. Late October. The assassination attempt happened on a Thursday. Isabella had been Mrs. Alexander Hayes for exactly 1 month. 30 days of walking on eggshells, of stolen glances and carefully maintained distance, of pretending her heart didn't race every time he entered a room. They'd settled into an uneasy rhythm, Alexander disappeared for business most days, returning late with shadows in his eyes and tension in his shoulders. Isabella read in the library, took long walks on the beach with security following at a discreet distance, and tried not to count down the remaining 11 months of her contract. Tried not to think about what would happen when those months ended. That Thursday started like any other. Isabella woke to gray skies promising rain, ate breakfast alone on the terrace while reading the Times, and was planning to spend the afternoon organizing the library's fiction section, a project she'd undertaken to feel useful. Alexander had left before dawn for meetings in the city, and wasn't expected back until evening. At 2:15 p.m. everything changed. Isabella was shelving books, humming softly to herself, when she heard the gunshots. Sharp cracks that echoed through the house. 3 in rapid succession, then shouting. Her blood turned to ice. The book in her hands, Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, appropriately, tumbled to the floor as Marcus burst through the library doors. "Mrs. Hayes, we need to move, now." His gun was drawn, his face grim. "What's happening?" "Now." He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a panel in the wall she'd never noticed before. It swung open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. "Safe room. Mr. Hayes's orders are to get you secured first." More gunshots, closer. Isabella's legs felt like water, but she forced herself down the stairs. Marcus right behind her, his body between her and whatever threat was coming. The safe room was small, windowless, lined with concrete and steel. A panic room. There was a bank of monitors showing security camera feeds, a phone, supplies. Marcus pushed her inside. "Lock this behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Mr. Hayes or me. You understand?" "Marcus, what about Alexander?" "He's on his way. He'll kill me if anything happens to you." Marcus's expression softened for just a moment. "You'll be safe here. I promise." The door closed with a heavy thunk. Isabella's hands shook as she engaged the locks. Then she turned to the monitors. Her breath caught in her throat. The security feeds showed chaos. Armed men in dark clothing had breached the perimeter, at least 6 of them, moving with military precision through the grounds. The estate's security team was engaged in a firefight near the main entrance. As Isabella watched in horror, one of Alexander's men went down, blood blooming across his chest. This was real. People were dying. On another monitor, she saw Marcus taking cover behind a marble pillar in the main hall, returning fire. 2 of the attackers were advancing on the library, on the safe room, on her. Isabella's phone buzzed violently in her pocket, making her jump. Alexander's name on the screen. "Isabella." His voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear the fear underneath. "Are you in the safe room?" "Yes." "Alexander, what's happening? Who are these people?" "Victor Santoro. He's making a move." In the background, she heard car engines, shouting. "I'm 15 minutes away. Maybe less if I break every traffic law between here and there. Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine, but Marcus, your men." "I know. Stay in that room. Don't open the door for anyone. Do you understand me? Anyone." The intensity in his voice made her heart hammer. "I understand." "Good. I'm coming for you. I swear to God, Isabella, I'm coming." The line went dead. 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. Isabella watched the monitors, her stomach churning as the firefight continued. Marcus took down one attacker, then another, but more kept coming. Where was their backup? Why did it feel like Alexander's entire security force was outnumbered? Then she saw him on the monitor, Victor Santoro himself, strolling through the front door like he owned the place, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He was saying something to Marcus, who'd been forced out of cover, bleeding from a shoulder wound but still standing. Victor gestured, and one of his men hit Marcus with the butt of a rifle. Marcus went down. Isabella's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a scream. Victor looked around the main hall, then directly at one of the security cameras. Directly at her. He smiled, slow and predatory, and mouthed words she could read even without sound. "I know you're here." She backed away from the monitors, her breath coming in short gasps. The safe room suddenly felt like a tomb. If they found the entrance, if they broke through the door. No. Alexander said 15 minutes. She checked her phone. 12 minutes had passed since his call. 3 more minutes. She could survive 3 more minutes. But Victor's men were systematically searching the house now. She watched them enter the library, tearing through shelves, upending furniture. One of them approached the wall panel, found the seam, started prying at it with a crowbar. 2 minutes. The panel began to give way. 1 minute. Isabella grabbed the only weapon in the safe room, a heavy flashlight, and positioned herself behind the door. If they got in, she'd fight. She wouldn't go quietly. The panel broke open. She could hear them on the stairs, heavy footsteps descending. The door handle rattled as someone tested it. "Come out, Mrs. Hayes," a voice called. Russian accent, thick and amused. "Mr. Santoro just wants to talk. No one needs to get hurt." Like hell, she believed that. "My husband is coming," Isabella shouted back, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "You should leave while you still can." Laughter. "Your husband is stuck in traffic in Queens, sweetheart. He's not—" The words cut off abruptly. Then gunfire, so loud in the confined stairwell that Isabella pressed her hands over her ears. Shouting in Russian, more gunfire. Then silence. The door handle turned. Isabella raised the flashlight, ready to strike. "Isabella, it's me. Open the door." Alexander. Her hands fumbled with the locks, finally getting them open. The door swung wide, and there he was. Alexander Hayes in a blood-splattered white shirt, a gun in his hand, his eyes wild until they found her. Then his expression crumbled into something raw and relieved. "You're okay," he breathed. "Thank God you're okay." Behind him on the stairs lay two bodies. Victor's men, dead or unconscious. Isabella couldn't tell and didn't want to know. Alexander holstered his gun and reached for her, pulling her out of the safe room and into his arms. Isabella went willingly, her face pressed against his chest, feeling his heart pound against her cheek. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you. You're safe." She was shaking, she realized, her whole body trembling with delayed shock and adrenaline. Alexander's arms tightened around her, one hand cradling the back of her head. "Marcus?" she whispered. "Alive. Injured but stable. My team secured the house." His voice was rough, strained. "Victor got away, but we'll handle that later. Right now." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. "Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you?" "No. I'm fine. I did what you said. I stayed in the room. Good girl." The words were automatic, almost absent, as his eyes scanned her face, her body, looking for injuries. Then he seemed to register what he'd said, and something flickered in his expression. Awareness. Heat. His thumb traced along her jawline. "Isabella?" The way he said her name made something inside her chest crack open. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw the fear he'd carried, the terror of losing her. Not his contract wife, not his business arrangement. Her. "Alexander," she whispered. He kissed her. Not the chaste press of lips from their courthouse wedding or the performative kisses for cameras. This was real, desperate and hungry and raw. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head, and Isabella's mind went blank except for the sensation of his mouth on hers, the way he tasted like coffee in desperation, the way her body seemed to melt into his. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "That wasn't... I shouldn't have... Don't." Isabella's hands fisted in his bloody shirt. "Don't apologize." They stood there in the dim stairwell, surrounded by violence and chaos, and something fundamental shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained shattered like glass. "We need to go," Alexander said finally, though he didn't move. "The police will be here soon. This scene needs to be managed." "What does that mean?" "It means I have people who handle things like dead bodies in my home." He said it matter-of-factly, but Isabella saw the weight of it in his eyes. This was his world. Violence, corruption, the kind of power that could make evidence disappear. She should have been horrified, should have run screaming. Instead, she took his hand. Alexander looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. "You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are." "I'm not most people." Isabella squeezed his fingers. "And you just saved my life. I put your life in danger in the first place." Self-recrimination darkened his expression. "This is my fault. Victor went after you because you're mine." "Stop." Isabella stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath on her face. "I signed that contract knowing there would be risks. I'm not a child, Alexander. I made my choice. Your choice was supposed to keep you safe. You promised to protect me, and you did." She reached up, her hand resting over his heart. "You came for me." Something in Alexander's expression cracked. "I will always come for you," he said, the words rough with emotion. "Always, Isabella. That's not part of the contract. That's just truth." The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Isabella understood what he wasn't saying, that somewhere in the last month, this arrangement had become more than business. At least for him, maybe for her too. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the moment. Alexander's expression shuddered, the businessman returning. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up before the authorities arrive." He led her upstairs, carefully steering her away from the bodies, the blood, the evidence of violence. Elena met them in the upper hallway, her stern face pale but composed. "Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, thank God." She looked at Isabella. "Come with me, dear. Let's get you into fresh clothes." Alexander released Isabella's hand reluctantly. "I'll handle the police. You don't have to give a statement. Marcus and the security team will cover everything." "What will they say?" "The truth, that Victor Santoro attempted a home invasion and was repelled by security. You were never in danger." His eyes met hers, and she understood. The safe room would be omitted from the report. The bodies in the stairwell would disappear. The truth would be sanitized into something legally palatable. "Okay," she agreed, because what else could she say? Elena whisked her away to her bedroom, helping her change out of her clothes. Isabella hadn't even realized they were covered in dust from the safe room, and into comfortable leggings and a sweater. Through the windows, Isabella could see police cars and an ambulance arriving. Marcus was being loaded onto a stretcher, conscious and arguing with the paramedics. "He'll be fine," Elena said, following her gaze. "That man is too stubborn to die." "What about the others? Alexander's security team?" Elena's expression tightened. "2 dead? 3 wounded. Could have been worse. 2 men dead. Because of her. Because Victor Santoro wanted to hurt Alexander by taking his wife." Isabella sank onto the bed, the reality finally hitting her. "This is insane. This whole situation. I'm not built for this." "None of us are, dear." Elena sat beside her in unexpected comfort. "But we survive anyway. That's what you do in Mr. Hayes's world, you survive." "Is that what you call living?" "Sometimes surviving is enough." Elena patted her hand. "He cares about you, you know. I've worked for Mr. Hayes for 8 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. It's just the contract." "No, Mrs. Hayes. It's not." Elena stood. "Get some rest. There will be questions later, but for now, just breathe." After Elena left, Isabella lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling. She could still feel Alexander's kiss, taste him on her lips, could still see the fear in his eyes when he'd found her, the relief when he'd pulled her into his arms. This was supposed to be temporary, a business arrangement. 11 more months and she'd walk away with her freedom and her money. So why did the thought of leaving feel like it would tear her apart? Night fell, bringing rain that lashed against the windows. The police eventually left, satisfied with whatever story Alexander and his lawyers had constructed. Isabella remained in her room, unable to face the main floor where men had died, where violence had shattered the illusion of safety. Around midnight, there was a soft knock on her door. "Come in," she called, knowing who it would be. Alexander entered, changed into fresh clothes, dark jeans and a black sweater that made his eyes look storm gray. He carried 2 glasses and a bottle of bourbon. "I thought you might need this. I don't really drink. Tonight's a good night to start." He poured 2 generous measures and handed her one. "To surviving." Isabella accepted the glass, their fingers brushing. "To surviving." The bourbon burned going down, but the warmth that followed was welcome. Alexander settled into the armchair by her window, looking out at the rain-soaked darkness. For a long moment, neither spoke. "Tell me about your sister," Isabella said finally. Alexander's hand tightened on his glass. "What? Your sister? The one who died? You mentioned her once, that first night at the penthouse." Isabella set down her glass. "I want to know. Why?" "Because you're not just the man who pays my bills or the Mafia boss everyone fears. You're you." She struggled for the right words. "And I want to understand you." Alexander was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly, "Her name was Sophie. She was 19 when she died. I was 26. What happened? She witnessed something she shouldn't have. A deal gone wrong between my father's organization and a rival family. They killed her to send a message." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Isabella could see the pain carved into his features. "I found her body. I held her while she bled out in my arms, and there was nothing I could do to save her." "Oh, Alexander." Isabella's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry. My father wanted to retaliate immediately. Start a war. but I convinced him to let me handle it strategically. Over the next 5 years, I systematically destroyed the family responsible. Not with violence, with economics. I bankrupted them, turned their allies against them, dismantled their empire piece by piece. He looked at her. By the time I was done, they had nothing. And the man who killed Sophie? He hanged himself in prison. The cold precision of his revenge should have frightened her. Instead, Isabella saw it for what it was. A brother's grief channeled into calculated destruction. Is that when you took over from your father? Yes. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack, nothing dramatic. Left me with an empire built on blood and compromise. Alexander drained his bourbon. I've been trying to legitimize operations ever since. Shift into legal businesses. Distance us from the violence. But men like Victor, they don't want peace. They want power. And they'll burn everything down to get it. Including innocent people. Including you. He met her eyes. Which is why you need to understand something, Isabella. After today, Victor won't stop. I hurt him, embarrassed him. He'll come at me again and he'll use you to do it. So what does that mean? It means I need you closer. Much closer. Alexander stood, crossing to stand before her. I want you to move into my wing of the house. My bedroom is a secure space. Reinforced walls, separate security system, direct access to the safe room. If something happens again, I need to be able to reach you immediately. Isabella's heart hammered. You want me to share your bedroom? I'll sleep on the couch. Or in my office. But I need you in that space where I can protect you. His jaw tightened. I know it violates the contract terms. I know you signed up for separate lives. But I'm asking you, please, Isabella, let me keep you safe. She should say no. Should remind him about boundaries and contracts and the 11 months still remaining. Should protect herself from the feelings already taking root in her chest. Instead, she said, okay. Relief washed over Alexander's features. Thank you. On one condition. Isabella stood, moving closer to him. No more secrets. If you're asking me to trust you with my life, I need you to trust me with the truth. About your business. About Victor. About what I'm really involved in. Isabella, I'm not a fool, Alexander. I know what people say about you, but I want to hear it from you. The truth. He studied her face for a long moment, weighing something. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right, the truth. He gestured for her to sit back down, then began to pace. My family has been involved in organized crime for 3 generations. Racketeering, money laundering, loan sharking, the traditional operations. When I took over, I started shifting us into legitimate businesses. Real estate, import-export, private security. I've divested from narcotics, human trafficking, most of the violence. Most? I'm not a saint, Isabella. Sometimes force is necessary to protect our interests. But I don't order hits, I don't target civilians, and I sure as hell don't involve innocent people. He stopped pacing, looking at her. The marriage, the real reason I needed a wife, is that I'm trying to build relationships with legitimate business leaders, politicians who can help me complete the transition. But they don't trust unmarried men in their 40s. They think we're either closeted or dangerous loners. A wife gives me credibility, stability. So I'm your beard for respectability. You were supposed to be. But then you turned out to be. He trailed off, something vulnerable in his expression. More. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning. More, Isabella repeated softly. What does that mean, Alexander? He crossed to her in 2 strides, dropping to his knees in front of where she sat on the bed. The position put them at eye level, his hands coming to rest on either side of her hips. It means that kiss wasn't about adrenaline or relief. It means I think about you constantly, what you're doing, if you're happy, if you hate being here. It means that when I saw those men breaking into the safe room when I thought I might lose you, his voice roughened. Isabella, I know this violates every term of our agreement. I know you signed up for a business arrangement, not this. But I need you to know, you matter to me. Not as a contract, not as a strategic asset, as you. Isabella's breath caught. She reached out, her hand cupping his jaw, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. Alexander, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just needed you to know. But Isabella was done with distance, done with pretending. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. What if I feel it too? His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Do you? I don't know what I feel. It's too fast, too complicated. But when I thought those men might get through the door, all I could think was that I'd never gotten to tell you." She swallowed hard. "That you're not what I expected. That this month has been strange and scary and sometimes wonderful. That I look forward to the moments when you come home." Alexander's eyes darkened with emotion. "Isabella, I'm scared," she admitted. "Of this. Of you. Of what I'm feeling. This isn't what I signed up for. I know." His thumb traced her bottom lip, the touch electric. "We can stop. Go back to the arrangement, maintain distance." "I don't want to stop." The words came out in a rush, truth she'd been denying for weeks. "I just don't know what this means. For the contract, for after." "Let's not think about after." Alexander's voice was rough, urgent. "For once, let's just be in this moment. No contract, no endgame. Just us." It was reckless. Stupid. Everything she'd promised herself she wouldn't do. But when Alexander looked at her like she was something precious, when his hands were gentle despite the violence he was capable of, Isabella found she didn't care about smart or safe. She kissed him. This kiss was different from the desperate collision in the stairwell. It was slow, exploratory, a conversation without words. Alexander groaned against her mouth, his hands sliding into her hair, and Isabella's entire body caught fire. She pulled him closer, needing more contact, more of him. "Isabella," he breathed between kisses. You should think about." "I'm done thinking." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I want this. I want you. If that's insane, if it's dangerous, I don't care." Something fierce and possessive flashed in Alexander's eyes. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He surged up, capturing her mouth in a kiss that was pure claiming. Isabella gasped, and he used the opportunity to deepen the kiss, his tongue sliding against hers. Her hands found their way under his sweater, mapping the hard muscles of his back, feeling him shudder at her touch. Alexander broke the kiss long enough to pull his sweater over his head, and Isabella's breath caught at the sight of him. Broad shoulders, defined abs, but also scars. So many scars. Evidence of a violent life, battles fought and survived. She traced one that ran along his ribs, and Alexander caught her hand. "Not pretty. You're beautiful," she said simply. Something in his expression cracked open. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her palm, her wrist, the inside of her elbow. "You undo me," he murmured against her skin. "Completely." They moved together with an urgency born of danger survived and desire no longer denied. Alexander laid her back on the bed, his body covering hers, his weight perfect and right. Between kisses he asked for permission, for every touch, every escalation, and Isabella gave it freely, drowning in sensation. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, they created their own tempest. Hours later, Isabella lay in Alexander's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, and she felt completely, terrifyingly content. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now we sleep. Tomorrow we deal with Victor and the fallout." Alexander pressed a kiss to her hair. "But tonight you're safe. I've got you. For 11 more months." His hand stilled on her shoulder. "Isabella, I know. We agreed not to think about after." She tilted her head to look at him. "But eventually we'll have to." Alexander's expression was unreadable in the darkness. "Yes," he said finally. "Eventually." But as Isabella drifted to sleep in his arms, surrounded by his warmth and strength, she couldn't help but wonder, how do you walk away from someone who's become your safe harbor in the storm? And more terrifying, what if she didn't want to? Isabella woke to cold metal against her wrists and the smell of rust and seawater. Her head throbbed where someone had hit her, and for a disorienting moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The coffee shop in Manhattan where she'd met Sophia, the black van that had pulled up alongside them on the sidewalk, the men with guns, Sophia's scream, cut short. She was in a warehouse, abandoned, judging by the broken windows and the way wind whistled through gaps in the corrugated metal walls. Her hands were zip-tied to a metal chair bolted to the concrete floor. The space was vast and empty except for shipping containers stacked against one wall, and a few other chairs scattered around like this was a regular occurrence. "Good, you're awake." Victor Santoro emerged from the shadows, impeccably dressed as always, his silver hair catching the weak light filtering through the dirty windows. He smiled like they were old friends meeting for lunch. "Where's Sophia?" Isabella's voice came out hoarse. "Your friend? Already released. She was never the target." Victor pulled up a chair, sitting backwards on it, arms crossed over the back. This is between your husband and me. You're just the message. Alexander will kill you for this. Oh, I'm counting on him trying. Victor's smile widened. That's the point, Mrs. Hayes. I've taken something he values and now he has to choose. His empire or your life. It's a test, you see. I want to know just how deep his feelings run for his contract wife. The emphasis on contract made Isabella's blood run cold. You know, please. Everyone in our world knows Alexander Hayes married some nobody from Brooklyn for show. What I didn't expect was that the Ice King would actually fall for you. Victor leaned closer. But he has, hasn't he? I saw it at the gala. Saw it again when he nearly burned down half of New York looking for my men after the attack on his estate. Alexander Hayes, who hasn't cared about anything except power and revenge for a decade, suddenly has a weakness. I'm not. You are. And now he has to prove it. Victor stood, checking his watch. He has 2 hours to get here alone, unarmed, or I start sending him pieces of you. Let's see if love is stronger than his survival instinct. He walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty space, leaving Isabella alone with 2 guards. She tested the zip ties, too tight, cutting into her wrists. Even if she could free herself, where would she go? The warehouse was probably surrounded, but she refused to be helpless. Not again. Manhattan. Same time. Alexander stood in his penthouse office staring at his phone. Victor's message had come 20 minutes ago. A photo of Isabella tied to a chair, bruised but alive, with GPS coordinates and demands. It's a trap, Marcus said from his position by the window, his arm still in a sling from the estate attack. He wants you dead, boss. The moment you walk in there alone, I know what he wants. Alexander's voice was deadly calm, but inside he was screaming. Isabella. They had Isabella. His hands clenched into fists. Mobilize everyone. I want teams positioned within a 3-block radius of those coordinates. Snipers, tactical units, everything. He said, come alone. I don't give a damn what he said. Alexander turned, and Marcus actually took a step back from the fury in his eyes. I'm getting her back, whatever it takes. His phone rang. Victor. Hayes. I assume you got my gift. If you've hurt her, she's fine. For now. But the clock is ticking. 2 hours, alone and unarmed, or your pretty wife starts losing fingers. Your choice. Empire or love. I'll be there. Alexander's voice dropped to something cold and lethal. And Victor, when this is over, when Isabella is safe, I'm going to end you. Not quick. Not merciful. You're going to beg me for death. Victor laughed. I look forward to it. Clock's ticking, Alexander. The line went dead. Marcus started giving orders into his radio, coordinating teams. Alexander moved to his safe, pulling out weapons, guns, knives, everything Victor had said he couldn't bring. He wasn't walking into that warehouse defenseless. Boss, Marcus said carefully, this could be the end of everything you've built. If you go in there like this, then it ends. Alexander checked his gun, his movements precise despite the rage burning through him. Marcus, I've spent 10 years building power, controlling territory, being smart and strategic. And for what? To die alone in some penthouse surrounded by money and respect, but no one who actually gives a damn. Isabella gives a damn. Yes, she does. Alexander met his friend's eyes. For the first time in a decade, I have something worth losing everything for. So that's what I'm going to do. Red Hook Warehouse. 90 minutes later, Isabella had managed to work one hand partially free when she heard the vehicles. Multiple engines coming fast. Victor's men tensed, weapons raised. Then gunfire erupted outside. Get her! Victor shouted. But Alexander's forces were already breaching. The warehouse doors exploded inward and tactical teams poured through in a coordinated assault. Isabella threw herself sideways, chair and all, as bullets flew over her head. Through the chaos she saw him, Alexander moving through his own men like an avenging angel, his gun firing with lethal precision. He wasn't alone. He'd never intended to come alone. Their eyes met across the warehouse, and Isabella saw the raw fear transform into relief. Isabella! He was moving toward her, but Victor appeared, gun pressed to Isabella's temple as he cut the zip ties and hauled her up as a human shield. Not another step, Hayes! Everything stopped. Alexander froze, his gun trained on Victor, but he couldn't shoot without risking Isabella. Let her go, Alexander said, his voice deadly calm. This is between us. Everything is between us now. You made it that way when you fell for her. Victor's grip tightened, making Isabella wince. So here's your choice. Drop the gun and let me walk out of here with her, or watch her die. Isabella felt the cold press of metal against her head and made a decision. She'd escaped death once in the safe room. She refused to be a victim again. She slammed her head backward into Victor's face, felt his nose crunch, and dropped as his grip loosened. Alexander's shot was instantaneous, center mass, dropping Victor before he could recover. Then Alexander was there, pulling her up, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Did he? I'm okay. I'm okay. Isabella grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. You came. Always. He pulled her against his chest, his arms like steel bands around her. I'll always come for you. Around them, Alexander's men were securing the warehouse, zip-tying Victor's surviving guards. Victor himself was alive but incapacitated, being loaded onto a stretcher by medics who definitely weren't calling the police. Marcus approached. Building secure. What do you want done with Santoro? Alexander looked at Isabella, then back at Marcus. Hospital first, then federal custody. I want him in prison, not dead. Let him rot. Marcus's eyebrows rose. The old Alexander would have ordered execution, but he nodded. Understood. You're letting him live, Isabella said quietly. For you. Alexander's thumb traced her cheekbone. You're making me better. Less like the monster I was becoming. As they walked out of the warehouse into the gray November afternoon, police sirens finally wailing in the distance, Isabella realized something profound. She'd been kidnapped, terrified, nearly killed, and Alexander had risked everything to save her. This wasn't a contract anymore. This was real. Isabella woke to the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital rooms. Her head still ached from where Victor's men had struck her, and her wrists were bandaged from the zip ties, but she was alive. The doctors had insisted on keeping her for observation. Mild concussion, dehydration, shock. What they couldn't treat was the way her heart felt too big for her chest every time she opened her eyes and saw Alexander sitting in the chair beside her bed. He was there now, asleep in an awkward position that would leave his neck cramped, still wearing the same clothes from the warehouse rescue 3 days ago. His hand rested on the bed near hers, close, but not touching, like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. Marcus had told her Alexander hadn't left the hospital except to shower once, hadn't slept more than an hour at a time, had threatened 2 doctors and a nurse when they suggested he go home and rest. He's been like a caged animal, Marcus had said with something almost like affection. I've never seen him like this, not even after Sophie. Isabella reached out slowly, her fingers brushing Alexander's. His eyes snapped open immediately, alert, despite the exhaustion etched into his features. Hey, she said softly. Hey. His hand closed around hers, grip gentle but firm. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck. But alive. She managed to smile. Thanks to you. Isabella. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. This never should have happened. I promised to keep you safe and I failed. Stop. She squeezed his hand. You saved me. You came for me. Exactly like you promised. I should have prevented it in the first place. Alexander's jaw tightened. Victor's in federal custody now. My lawyers made a deal. I testified about his criminal operations in exchange for immunity and his permanent removal from New York. He's going away for life. You testified against another crime boss? I testified for you. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you. Not anymore. The raw honesty in his words made Isabella's throat tight. Alexander, we need to talk about what this means. For us. For the contract. He stilled, something guarded entering his expression. The contract. It's been almost 2 months. We have 10 months remaining. She took a breath. But nothing about this arrangement is what we agreed to anymore. We're sleeping in the same bed. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. We've been intimate. I was kidnapped because of our connection. This stopped being fake a long time ago. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. What are you saying? I'm saying I need to know what you want. Really want. Not what the contract says, not what's strategic for your business. What do you want, Alexander? He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The morning sun backlit him, turning his dark hair silver at the edges. When he spoke, his voice was rough. What I want is impossible. Why? Because you signed up for 1 year. You signed up for money and freedom, not for life with a man whose world nearly got you killed. He turned to face her. Isabella, you deserve so much better than me. You deserve someone safe, Someone whose enemies won't use you as a weapon. Someone who can give you a normal life. What if I don't want normal? You should. His expression was anguished. God, you should want normal. You should want to run as far from me as possible. But I don't. Isabella pushed herself up in the bed, ignoring the way her head spun. Alexander, I'm not some naive girl who doesn't understand what she's gotten into. I've seen your world, the violence, the danger, the impossible choices. And yes, it's terrifying. But you know what's more terrifying? The thought of walking away from you in 10 months because that's what a piece of paper says we're supposed to do. His eyes were stormy, conflicted. You're not thinking clearly. You've been through trauma. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. She met his gaze steadily. I'm in love with you, Alexander Hayes. Not with your money or your power or the protection you offer. With you, the man who reads philosophy at 3 a.m., who donated anonymously to save 3 public libraries in Brooklyn, who cried when he told me about his sister, the man who would burn down the world to keep me safe. Alexander's breath caught. Isabella, I know it's insane. I know it's too fast, too complicated, but it's true. Her voice softened. So, I need to know, what do you want? He was across the room in 3 strides, his hands framing her face, his forehead pressed to hers. I want you, he said, the words torn from somewhere deep. I want you forever, not just for the remaining months of a contract. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to protect you, cherish you, build a life with you that's real and honest and ours. Then let's do it. Isabella's hands covered his. Let's tear up the contract. Your freedom. I'm choosing you, that is my freedom. She pulled back enough to look into his eyes. Alexander, I don't want the money. I don't want the divorce clause or the clean exit. I want a real marriage. With you. If you want that too. For a moment he just stared at her and Isabella saw a decade of loneliness and grief and careful control crack open. Then he kissed her, soft and reverent, like she was something sacred. I want that, he whispered against her lips. More than I've ever wanted anything. Then it's decided. Isabella smiled through the tears sliding down her cheeks. We're staying married. Alexander laughed, the sound rusty but genuine, and kissed her again. 6 months later, Reed and Hayes Books, Brooklyn. The spring sun warmed the sidewalk outside what had been Reed and Daughter Books. The sign now read, Reed and Hayes Books, and through the large front windows customers browsed shelves that had been restored and expanded. Isabella had reopened the store 3 months ago, using money from Alexander's legitimate businesses. He'd insisted on investing, making them true partners. Isabella stood behind the mahogany counter, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. 4 months pregnant, and she still couldn't quite believe it. Neither could Alexander, who checked on her approximately every 2 hours, despite the security team stationed discreetly around the block. The bell chimed, and Sophia burst through the door with her characteristic energy. Please tell me you have the new thriller everyone's talking about. My book club is tomorrow and I'm desperate. Back corner, mystery section. Isabella grinned. And Sophia, thanks for managing this place during everything. Sophia's expression softened. Are you kidding? Best job I ever had. Even if your overprotective husband did install a security system that could probably protect Fort Knox. She paused. You're happy, right? Really happy? Deliriously. Isabella touched her stomach. Terrifyingly happy. Good, because if he ever hurts you, I know people who know people. Sophia winked and headed for the mystery section. The bell chimed again. Alexander stepped inside, looking incongruous in his tailored suit among the worn paperbacks and cozy reading chairs. But his eyes softened when they found Isabella, the way they always did now. Mrs. Hayes, he said formally, though the smile playing at his lips ruined the effect. Mr. Hayes, she matched his tone. What brings you to my humble bookstore? Checking on my favorite investment. He crossed to the counter, leaning over to kiss her softly. His hand covered hers on her belly. How are my girls? We're perfect. Isabella had cried for an hour when they'd learned they were having a daughter. Alexander had cried too and admitted he wanted to name her Sophie. Though your daughter has strong opinions about what I eat. She rejected my lunch. Then we'll get you something else. He was already pulling out his phone to call his assistant. Alexander, I'm pregnant, not helpless. Humor me. His eyes were serious despite the light tone. After almost losing you, you didn't lose me, I'm right here. She caught his hand, squeezing. And I'm not going anywhere. The bell chimed continuously as the afternoon crowd came in. Students from the local high school, retirees, young parents with strollers. Alexander stayed, helping customers with a patience that would have shocked anyone from his former world. He was different now, still powerful, still commanding, but softer. The legitimate businesses were thriving, the criminal element systematically dismantled. It had cost him relationships, territory, power. He'd told her it was worth it. "I'd rather build something real with you than rule an empire of shadows," he'd said. As evening approached, Isabella flipped the closed sign and locked the door. Alexander was shelving books in the fiction section, looking almost domestic. "You know," Isabella said, watching him, "when I signed that contract, I thought I was selling a year of my life. And instead?" Alexander looked up. "Instead, I found the rest of my life." She crossed to him, letting him pull her into his arms. "Thank you for not letting me go. Thank you for not leaving when you realized what I was." He kissed her temple, then her lips, soft and lingering. "I love you, Isabella Hayes. No contract, no conditions. Just love. I love you too." They stood there in the bookstore surrounded by stories of other people's lives, holding each other close. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with evening traffic. Somewhere in Manhattan, Alexander's empire of legitimate businesses continued to grow. In 10 months, they'd welcome their daughter. But in this moment, in this place, they were just Alexander and Isabella, two people who'd found each other through a desperate contract and chose to stay because of love. The Hamptons estate. That night, they drove home as the sun set over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The estate was peaceful now, the security still present but less oppressive. Alexander had hired more staff, filled the empty rooms with life. After dinner, they walked on the beach, Isabella's hand in Alexander's, their daughter kicking softly beneath her mother's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked. "Everything you gave up to be with me?" Alexander stopped, turning her to face him. The ocean crashed behind them, and the wind whipped her dark hair around her face. "Not for a single second," he said firmly. "Isabella, that life was killing me slowly. I was becoming the monster everyone believed I was. You saved me. We saved each other." "Yes." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that made him look years younger. "We did." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, the contract they'd signed in Morrison's office a year ago. "I've been carrying this around waiting for the right moment." Isabella recognized it immediately. The agreement that was supposed to govern their marriage for 12 months that promised her freedom and $500,000. "Burn it," she said. Alexander produced a lighter, and together they watched the contract catch fire, the paper curling and blackening until nothing remained but ash that scattered in the ocean wind. "Mrs. Hayes," Alexander said, pulling her close, "would you do me the honor of marrying me? Again? Without contracts or conditions? Just a man asking a woman he loves to spend forever with him?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Are you proposing to your own wife?" "I'm proposing to the woman I love. The wife part is just a technicality." She laughed through her tears. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Two people who'd started as strangers bound by paper and ended as lovers bound by choice. 3 months later they married again, a small ceremony in the bookstore with Sophia as maid of honor, Marcus as best man, and Elena crying openly in the front row. No contracts, no conditions, just vows spoken from the heart. And when Sophie Elena Hayes was born on a snowy December night, Alexander held his daughter with tears streaming down his face, and Isabella knew with absolute certainty that some contracts were meant to be broken, because the best love stories aren't the ones we plan, they're the ones that choose us. The end. Isabella pushed the stroller through Central Park, Sophie chattering happily at the ducks on the pond. Alexander walked beside them, his hand at the small of Isabella's back, Sophia and Marcus trailing behind, arguing about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. They were just another family enjoying a Saturday morning. No guards, shadowing their every move. Alexander had stepped away from that world completely. No cameras, no whispers, just normal. Sophie pointed at the ducks. "Dada, look. I see them, sweetheart." Alexander scooped up his daughter, settling her on his hip. She grabbed his nose with chubby fingers and he pretended it hurt, making her giggle. Isabella watched them, her heart so full it ached. This man who'd once been called the most dangerous in New York was now making silly faces at their toddler in the middle of Central Park. "You're staring," Alexander said, catching her eye. "Can you blame me?" Isabella moved closer, and Sophie reached for her, wanting both parents. They stood there, their daughter between them, and Isabella remembered the desperate woman who'd signed a contract to save her bookstore. She'd thought she was selling herself for money and freedom. Instead, she'd found everything she'd never known she needed. "I love you," she whispered to Alexander. He whispered, "I love you more," he replied, and Sophie, not to be left out, announced, "I love ducks." They laughed, and their laughter carried across the park, the sound of a family that had found its way home.